Well, it's a photo that has the bird world flapping with excitement. Naturalist John Young has taken the first picture, in more than 100 years, mind you, of one of Australia's and the world's most secretive birds. Now, of course, I'm talking about the night parrot. Here is how John Young described the moment.
I could not believe it. I played the call. All of a sudden, right within metres of us, I said to him, I said, "Did you do that?" He said, No. He said, "It's right there." He said, "It's a bloody night parrot there." And I said, "Oh, bullshit."
There you go. That's John Young. It's the Twitcher's version of proof of the lost ark, if you like. Yesterday, he revealed that photo at the Queensland Museum in Brisbane. But was the evidence conclusive proof of a sighting? Eminent birdwatcher and editor of BirdLife Australia is Sean Dooley, and he joins me again. Sean, you were there. What sort of day was it?
I was. It was a pretty highly charged day. There were a lot of very excited people. The night parrot is the holy grail of world bird watching. It's probably the hardest
world bird watching.
World bird watching. It would probably be the hardest animal to see on the planet that still exists. And people kept reporting them, but the sightings were always inconclusive. No one ever got anywhere near a photograph. So there was a packed auditorium in Brisbane yesterday of the faithful and a few skeptics, all gathered to see what evidence John had. So it was kind of like grand final day for bird watchers.
The night parrot skeptics came out in their numbers.
Yeah.
Tell me what you saw.
Well, we had an introductory sort of talk about the history of the night parrot and the history of John with the night parrot. He's been looking for it hardcore for 15 years, and particularly over the last 6. And it reminded me of that time when Rob Oakeshott stood up in Parliament and spent 17 minutes announcing who he was going to support. There was almost almost a riot of people just itching to see it. And then when he finally put up the first photograph, he showed about 5, I think it was, 4 or 5, definitely. It just drew audible gasps from the crowd. This was a bird that every bird watcher had dreamed of seeing since they first heard about it. Nobody's ever been able to prove they've seen a live one for over 100 years, and no one had photographed a live one. And there it was, stunning green bird in the spotlight by a spinifex bush on the sort of bare kind of gravelly ground, in a kind of hunched over posture, sort of almost a grass green, emeraldy green with black flecks and yellow underneath, and this big black eye, which sort of goes to the theory that they are actually a night bird. They're not, we didn't know. We knew so little about it from the early naturalists as to whether they saw them at night, but there are other parrots out there like Burke's parrot and elegant parrot that go and drink at night. And probably a lot of what people think are night parrots are these birds that they see in the dark and go, "That's night, it's a parrot, there you go."
There's a bit of Loch Ness Monster about this story, isn't there? Do they or don't they exist? And was this mistaken for something else?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yeah. So it looked as you expected?
It did. It did. I mean, I'd seen the small
specimen
images in the Australian Weekend Australian on the weekend, and and seen photos of the specimens, but it really struck me as how much brighter it seemed in this photo than you see in the dusty old specimens, which are sometimes pretty grunged. The last specimen collected was one that a decapitated bird found under a fence line in southwest Queensland in 2006.
Which clearly didn't confirm the existence of the large black eye.
No, exactly. Yes. So it was pretty amazing stuff, and John showed another, I think it was all a bit of a whirl, but at least 4 photos. And what was even more impressive was he actually showed 6 seconds of footage that he was able to grab. And while the footage wasn't as distinct as the photographs, which were very clear photographs, very close up, because this bird, when he eventually saw it after 5 years of going out there and hearing it and finally got it to come out, it was right at his feet. So it was too close to focus in the binoculars, he said. So the video footage was taken from above, and it was of the night parrot. He thinks it's a male. It had responded to a tape of its neighbour's call, and because he thinks there's more than one pair out there. He's convinced of that, and it responded. So it was giving a bit of an aggressive display, and it may have even been giving a kind of distraction display because the female might have been nesting nearby. It's hard to know, but instead of, everyone would have assumed they would run between the spinifex like a mouse, but it was more like a hopping mouse. It kind of did this little bunny hops across, sort of fluffed up and jumping around. So that really got the audience whirling.
So was it lacking in grace? Is that a fair description of how it moved?
It wasn't the most elegant of moves.
Yeah.
And
a bit like someone sprinting with their hands in their pockets.
Yes, yeah, and that's pretty accurate. And according to John's account of his encounter with the birds over several years now, they really very, very, very rarely move from within the spinifex clumps. And spinifex, as you probably know, is the arid country grass tussocks, and instead of the leaves being like normal grass, they're kind of rolled up into hypodermic-like spikes, so they're almost impenetrable, and they live in a series of tunnels and things under here and hardly ever come out, as far as we know. So they're apparently very weak flyers, and it looks like they're kind of awkward walkers as well.
Awkward all round.
Yes.
I mentioned the skeptics. So you said there were skeptics in the audience. There's this existence of skeptics, I guess, because there's been so hard to come across this bird, and people have been looking and trying so hard for so long.
Yeah.
Did you get the sense that even the most sceptical of people in the audience was convinced with what they saw yesterday?
It was a very pro John Young crowd. He had a lot of friends there, but everyone that I spoke to afterwards, including people who are they're scientists, their job is to be sceptical, and so they weren't going to accept the evidence just because John's a good bloke or anything. So everybody that I spoke to was convinced that what they'd seen was real, and several people said, well, if he's faked this, then he deserves a medal for faking things, because I don't think James Cameron could have done a better CGI job on it. It was
was that good?
Yeah, it looked extremely convincing to me, and talking to other people who are actually far more knowledgeable, they're pretty happy with it. And apparently John was able to obtain some feathers from the area.
Yeah, he told us that. Did you see the feathers or not?
We saw a picture of one.
Yeah,
but he said they're currently being analysed by the Museum of WA, and supposedly the results should have been out yesterday, but I certainly haven't heard. So if that DNA matches with the specimens, then it kicks it out of the park in terms of being incontrovertible.
What's going on here? It sounds like there's more backroom discussions and counting of the numbers than a week in Canberra at the moment. Why is there so much secret around this?
Well, I think it's such an important find, because it's such an exciting find, because this really is the holy grail of world bird watching. Birdwatchers around the world would kill to see this, but it means that there's a whole lot of pressure now on. I always would contemplate, and we'd talk, what would you do if you saw a night parrot? And
these bird watchers late night discussions.
Yeah, and the consensus was 50% of people would keep it to themselves because they wouldn't want the attention. John has put enormous resources and time into this, and I suspect no one else would have had the dedication to do this. He's just kind of nuts, I have to say. Totally, he's a brilliant field naturalist and totally obsessed by this bird. And I think lesser mortals would have given up. But the pressure on him now is enormous from all directions. He's keeping the location secret, which has got the endorsement of bodies like BirdLife Australia, who agree with John's public statements that the conservation of this bird is paramount.
Not just the location, though. He wouldn't do the sound for us.
No, he wouldn't play the sound. And there's two arguments. I'm not sure what I feel on that. The argument is, and I spoke to John privately, and he said, look, this bird's he will give it out eventually, he said, to researchers, but he's going to hold on to it for the next couple of years. And he said that forever, he said, if it's been we haven't known about it for 100 years. He's thinking getting the call out there in the next year or two is not going to save the bird as such, but it is the key because it's the way he found them. But it's such a low return. All the hundreds of nights he spent out there after he'd recorded the call, he only heard the bird 3 times in those hundreds of nights. So it may not actually be that productive as a way to find the birds. But there is the argument that maybe it needs to be provided to people so that other people can go out and look. But as John pointed out, he said his encounter with these birds is they are the most sensitive birds he's ever encountered. And his specialty is finding rare and hard to find birds. And he said any bit of disturbance, they will just not move for days. And so you've got to be really careful about how you don't want people going out willy-nilly and trampling over likely habitat.
But surely there'll be more people looking now, since this has been confirmed.
I think it's fired up. And the other thing is, it's not just bird watchers who'll be out there. Unfortunately, there is a big wildlife smuggling trade, and if someone was to get their hands on a night parrot nest in particular, they would fetch a huge price for the eggs. And
by huge price, what are we talking?
I'm sure tens of thousands of dollars. It's big business. Sort of the underworld would probably be involved. There are really obsessed collectors out there who would do anything to get their hands on specimens or whatever. So this pressure on John is incredible. So hopefully he's got the right sort of advisors and going to work with the right people so that he can realise his dream of actually conserving this parrot, so we don't lose this ghost of the outback again.
The ghost, that's exactly what it's been, isn't it? All right, Sean, just before I let you go, were you jealous? Honestly.
There was a big part of me that was envious, but I also thought, I just wouldn't want the pressure or the scrutiny. I'm happy to know it exists, and I'd love to see one day, but I'll just be happy that it's out there.
For all we know, you're part of that 50% that may have spotted one and never told anybody, eh?
Not this time, no, unfortunately. I've frozen in the outback, but I've never got close.
All right, Sean, thank you for coming in and telling us about your stay. Really, really interesting stuff.
No, pleasure, Cameron.
Sean Dooley, Twitcher and editor of Australian BirdLife magazine, a good friend of Bush Telegraph. You're on RN and Radio Australia.